I quit my job after a manager harassed me, then exposed her secret Instagram filled with illegal activity, leading to her firing and breakup. Thank you to all 100 of you for correcting me on the term intensive purposes, which should be intents and purposes. I also appreciate everyone who upvoted, awarded, or left comments. Much love. Greetings, everyone. This is my first post here, and I hope it's appropriate for this forum. I am using a throwaway account since some individuals in this story may recognize my Reddit handle, so it's a matter of safety. I apologize for any formatting issues, as this was written on my mobile device. A brief summary can be found at the end due to the length of this tale. Around 2014, I was employed by a major cinema chain in a small city in the Midwest. The job was very enjoyable despite the low pay and virtually no opportunities for advancement. I like to believe that I am proficient at my work, and I give my best effort regardless of where I am employed. In this specific case, I was among the most experienced employees at the cinema, aside from two other individuals who worked part-time while holding full-time positions elsewhere. For the sake of this narrative, I need to introduce Jane, a pseudonym. Jane began her employment at the cinema 2 months before I did. She had been a supervisor at another location and was keen on advancing within our theater. Shortly after my arrival, one of the managers departed for another theater, resulting in the supervisor being promoted. We had 2 managers in total, a general manager, who held the highest position at the theater, and a supervisor, who was essentially a manager in training. This detail is crucial. Despite there being another candidate who was nearly guaranteed the supervisor role due to nearly 8 years of service, Jane somehow obtained it. Rumors circulated about her having a relationship with the general manager upon her hiring, and this speculation was reignited. I was apathetic toward the situation. After all, I was just a lowly employee in the corporate machine. Subsequently, Jane ascended, and the long-serving crew member left the company feeling betrayed. Once Jane was promoted, a meeting was held to address her advancement and emphasize the theater's commitment to professionalism and the avoidance of favoritism. The discussion included specific instructions that regular crew members should not socialize with management outside of work. However, Jane did not seem to heed this advice. She continued to socialize with crew members, most of whom were underage, engaging in various activities such as drinking with minors, taking them to bars, purchasing them drinks, and even buying alcohol to be consumed at her residence. Though I personally did not have issues with drinking at home, I mention this for context, as well as her smoking marijuana with them and sharing photos on Instagram. I should also mention that Jane maintained a secret Instagram account where she posted images with her friends from the cinema, believing that since none of her family or boyfriend used the platform, no one would find out. Even more troubling was her relationship with a 19-year-old employee. Jane had been in a long-term relationship with her boyfriend, who had supported her for all intents and purposes. Alongside her relationship with the 19-year-old, she was also involved with a 17-year-old. I even witnessed them together in the break room at one point. She essentially warned me about the consequences of revealing this information. Honestly, she could have simply asked me to keep quiet, and I would have judged her without expressing my thoughts. Fast forward about a year, another manager left for a new opportunity, with Jane once again moving up and someone else stepping into the supervisor role. I won't elaborate too much, but despite my experience and performance, I was overlooked for the promotion, which instead went to a newer crew member who was close friends with Jane. This was confirmed by another manager, who informed me that Jane had indeed developed a solid rapport with the general manager, who made the final decision. I began to feel frustrated while earning minimum wage for years at a job that seemed indifferent to my efforts. Consequently, I started to prepare for my departure. Before detailing my exit, I should mention that Jane harbored a problem with me, possibly still does. Although I had discussed some issues I had with her, I never formally confronted her about her behaviors up to that point. I chose to let it go. However, my lack of engagement with her antics infuriated her to the extent that she made my work life miserable. While she lacked power as a supervisor, her newfound management position allowed her to assign me unfavorable shifts, persuade coworkers to avoid me, make empty threats against my physical safety and job security, and even have someone slash my tires. I have no solid proof, but my car was parked in an employee lot accessible only to staff. Additionally, she mocked my girlfriend, who is now my wife, for her invisible illness, multiple sclerosis, and made her life miserable for having certain limitations due to her disability. Taking all of this into account, along with my girlfriend going off to college and being overlooked for the promotion, I decided to seek new employment. I had a few close friends at the cinema, including my now wife, whom I met while working there. A silver lining, indeed. I informed some of them about my new job, but requested they keep it confidential, as I still had 2 weeks left at the theater. I also asked the general manager to keep my departure quiet, as I was concerned Jane and her group would interfere with the news. I expressed my desire to announce my decision personally, leading him to keep quiet. Importantly, my new job promised to pay me double what I earned at the cinema. My friends were thrilled for me, as I would be starting a position that offered more than the theater managers made, one that would also help redirect my life in a positive manner. Unfortunately, given the ongoing tension between Jane and me, she decided to make one final attack, starting a rumor that I planned to call out from all my shifts in the 2 weeks leading up to my new job. With her plan in motion, the general manager approached me and informed me that I would not be scheduled for shifts during that period. I attempted to explain that the rumors were unfounded, stressing that I needed to work as I required income. I mentioned that Jane was behind the rumor and began detailing her actions as well. Naturally, he did not believe me, asserting that Jane would never act in such a manner. It came down to her word versus mine. I reached out to my new employer, who confirmed that my start date was fixed and that their budget would not allow for changes. Essentially, I found myself without a job for the next 2 weeks. While I was frustrated, I was fortunate to still be living with family and not facing rent costs. I accepted the situation and treated it as an unexpected 2-week vacation. But Jane was not finished. She escalated by having one of her associates contact my new employer, claiming I had been fired. Fortunately, I was able to reassure my new boss that I had resigned and thoroughly explained the situation, marking the last straw. Upon finishing my final day at the cinema, I felt an unfortunate mix of sadness and frustration for not being able to work out the remaining weeks at a job I had held for years. However, I was resolute in seeking revenge. A key rule when leading a secret life and maintaining a secret Instagram is to avoid adding everyone you know to the account. I connected with a friend of a friend, who also had little regard for Jane. Let's refer to him as Joe. Joe and I shared a history from high school and worked together briefly at the theater. Although Joe had once been part of Jane's social circle, they had a minor falling out that left him discontent with her. I approached Joe over lunch, which I treated him to. Food is crucial for all revenge plots, where we discussed my issues with Jane. After some conversation, I requested his assistance. I needed access to her secret Instagram account, which documented her underage interactions, unlawful drinking, marijuana use, and showcased her relationships with both a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. With minimal discussion, he granted me full access. I captured screenshots of everything 2 to 3 years' worth of illegitimate and marginally illegal conduct. This was ample material to secure her termination and raise questions regarding her relationships. I printed the screenshots on the highest quality material available at CVS and made copies on a few flash drives for backup. I purchased 2 yellow padded envelopes, safety first, and filled each with copies of all posts along with a flash drive containing additional data. Each envelope contained a note directed at the appropriate parties. One of the envelopes was secured to the back door of the theater, where I knew there was somewhat of a blind spot. I sneaked into the parking lot from behind and stealthily taped the envelope to the door, ensuring it bore the general manager's name. In the accompanying letter, I expressed that one of the managers operated a secret Instagram account with substantial evidence of favoritism, improper behavior, and mingling with underage crew members, among other misconduct. I explicitly requested her immediate termination, threatening to escalate the information to both the district manager and corporate office if necessary. I made certain it was placed where the general manager would discover it during his morning rounds. The second envelope, along with its letter, was delivered to her home by Joe, who agreed to do so, knowing Jane's schedule and where she lived from previous outings. With both packages dispatched, it was merely a matter of time before action was taken. Before long, I began receiving threats from Jane's entourage, all proclaiming they knew I was the culprit and that she would retaliate against me, asserting that she had not done anything to warrant this. Predictably, I was unfazed. I no longer worked there, and I hoped to erase any further dealings with them. Reports indicated that she was summoned to the main office, where the general manager confronted her about the evidence. Ultimately, he was forced to terminate her due to clear violations of her employment guidelines. Additionally, her boyfriend, equipped with undeniable proof, ended their relationship and kicked her out of his home. The last word I had was that she moved further north and struggled to maintain stable employment. Her family distanced themselves from her once the truth about her infidelity surfaced, and the indiscretion involving a 17-year-old only worsened her position. Ultimately, I commenced my new job without issue and moved on from that chapter of my life. I have not encountered anyone from the cinema since. Summary: a manager makes my life unbearable, continues to associate inappropriately with underage crew members, and ultimately faces the consequences. Enjoy your job loss and the end of your relationship. Story 2. I returned from class to find Larry had taken my job. During a risky lift, I let him fail. Now I'm back in charge. I am a millwright specializing in the refurbishment of natural gas turbines. I work with a highly skilled team where everyone has a specific responsibility. My responsibility involves supervising everything that is lifted with a crane. My official title is rigger. If a load fails, I am accountable. If someone is injured while I am overseeing a lift, I am liable. If equipment is damaged while I am in control of a lift, I bear the responsibility. The incident I am referring to occurred approximately 2 years ago, but we need to go back a few years further for the background. I was a new addition to the crew and had proven my competency in rigging, so after about 6 months with this group, my superintendent appointed me to handle all rigging tasks. I may not have been the quickest rigger, but my focus on safety and insistence on doing things correctly, even if it took extra time, meant that my superintendent did not have to oversee every rigging operation. He could relax, knowing I had everything under control. Another millwright joined the crew around the same time I did. Let's call him Larry. Initially, we did not get along, but after a few months we became friends. Larry had a act now, think later attitude, much like the superintendent I work under. This approach often led Larry to make mistakes, yet his speed and hard work were commendable, and I respected that. He lacked exceptional skills in any specific area, so he did not have a designated position. This sometimes resulted in him being assigned to less desirable tasks, and I soon discovered that he was quite envious of my role as the rigger. Occasionally, he would make comments like, "I'm going to take your job," not by getting me fired, but by pushing me down a rank and taking my position as rigger. He would creep up behind me while I was reviewing my checklists to point out something I may not have checked yet. If supervision was in proximity, he would ensure his voice was audible. At this juncture, I should point out that I stand out distinctly among this crew. I grew up in a strict Christian cult, but in my mid-20s, I realized the truth and departed, at a significant personal cost, losing my family and friends due to the cult's harsh shunning policies. Some of the more stringent practices have stayed with me, such as never having been intoxicated, not using tobacco, and avoiding recreational drugs. I communicate professionally, largely avoiding slang or colloquialisms. These characteristics starkly contrast with a crew of men who travel extensively for work and endure harsh conditions away from home for extended periods. Conversely, Larry fit right in. He quickly became the favorite of the superintendent, bringing him gifts of his preferred alcohol, spending late nights with him after work, and even sharing motel rooms during trips. I, on the other hand, would leave work, go to the gym, prepare my meals for the next day, and ensure I got at least 6 hours of sleep to perform well the following day. I recognize that this behavior puts me at a social disadvantage in the workplace, but I prefer to let my work speak for itself. Fast forward about 18 months. We begin a project right before the COVID-19 pandemic strikes. Approximately 2 weeks into the assignment, I have to attend a mandatory class offered by my union. It is a 40-hour course in a different state, meaning I will be absent for nearly an entire week, including travel time. I obtain approval from management and leave, with Larry handling my rigging duties in my absence. A few days later, I find myself lying in bed, anxiously stressing about the final test I must take the following morning. If I do not pass the exam, the entire week will be wasted. I tend to psych myself out before tests, though in reality, I need not worry, as I am a good student and perform well on exams. Suddenly, my phone buzzes. It is a message from Larry. "I care about you, friend, but I am going to undermine you." I reply, "What are you saying?" "When you return, I will be the rigger. You can do the less desirable work from now on." I am not proud of my response, but it reflects my feelings in that moment. Be cautious when trying to undermine someone who may be wiser than you. I am far from the most intelligent person you might encounter, but I do enjoy reading, studying, and learning. Moreover, being smarter than Larry isn't an achievement by any measure. The following morning, I passed the exam and returned to the job site, only to discover that Larry had indeed taken over my position as rigger and was asserting his authority over me while I performed the tasks he would usually handle. To be honest, it felt somewhat like a vacation initially. Earning nearly $40 an hour to clean parts or tighten flanges without pressure. Count me in. Nonetheless, I was frustrated. I was frustrated because I knew I could perform my job more effectively than he could. I recognized that he had a better rapport with the superintendent due to their similar personalities, but I felt my position shouldn't be forfeited simply because Larry had more in common with our supervisor than I did. Regardless, I needed to work with the cards I had been dealt. Just 3 days after returning from class, however, the project was halted. COVID-19 was rapidly spreading across the nation. As a precaution, the plant suspended operations until further notice. We were sent home for about 3 days before being called out for an emergency shutdown as a turbine had crashed. We rolled out and arrived on site 48 hours later in rural Alabama. We immediately got to work. For this specific unit, you must lift the entire roof in 2 sections using a crane to access the enclosure. Compared to many items we lift in a project like this, the roof is relatively lightweight. The turbine rotor may weigh over 100,000 pounds, but the roof usually weighs around 7,000 pounds. Although it is lightweight, it is large and there are critical components surrounding the roof that could be damaged if not lifted cautiously. The typical procedure involves positioning oneself atop the roof after it has been unbolted, wearing a full body harness, and secured to an approved anchor point with a minimum capacity of 5,000 pounds per OSHA regulations. We then gradually take the weight of the roof with the crane until it is suspended, and then climb down and finish the lift until it is placed on the ground or onto a truck for transport. The superintendent instructs me to get on the roof with Larry and support him. "Just do what Larry tells you to do." "Understood, boss." I put on my harness, climb to the top, and begin evaluating the scenario. The rigging for lifting the roof consists of 4 5-ton chain falls. They can safely hold 20 tons, well above the weight of the roof. The crane is also substantially rated for this lift, even with the boom extended to clear another building while bringing the roof down. Larry has everything rigged, but there is no tension on the wire rope slings. Then I notice his critical error. He failed to account for boom deflection. When a crane bears the weight of a load, the boom bends downward. Depending on how the crane is set up and the weight of the load, this can result in the crane hook being offset. This means that when the load is lifted off the ground, it can swing. Swinging is always undesirable. A significant swing could tip the crane or collide with equipment or personnel. It is extremely hazardous. At this point, I begin my calculations. Is this weight sufficient, even while swinging, to tip the crane? No, not at all. Could it break a chain fall? No, definitely not. Are there individuals in proximity who could be injured? No, it is just the 2 of us. Is there any equipment that could be compromised if it swings? Yes, an electrical control panel situated in the swing path, but all power has been cut off and it has been disconnected. I decide to let Larry face the consequences. He glances at me and asks my thoughts. I respond, "This is your operation, boss." He inquires about my meaning. I lock eyes with him and draw my finger across my throat. He becomes anxious because he understands precisely what I imply. He begins double-checking everything, but still does not acknowledge the boom deflection. After a couple of minutes, he concludes I must be mistaken and decides to proceed with the lift. I stop him and remind him to secure himself with his harness. He is unaware that we are about to go for a ride. Generally, when I am rigging, my first step is to ascertain the weight of the item I am rigging. This information is crucial. If I know the weight, I can instruct the crane operator to monitor how much weight is on the crane, enabling me to determine when the object should begin to lift. If the weight exceeds 10% of what it should weigh, we must halt and reevaluate the situation. Rigging failures can result in the object being propelled skyward, leading to all sorts of chaos if a hidden bolt holding something together breaks because excessive force was used to lift it. I ask Larry if he knows the roof's weight. He does not. I do, but I do not disclose it. He begins signaling the crane to lift slowly. The operator obliges and starts hoisting. I observe the boom becoming increasingly off-centered. We are likely 2 feet off the center of the load at this point, leading to a potential swing of nearly 4 feet. I halt Larry, asking him to check how much weight is on the crane. It reads 11,000 pounds, which is 4,000 pounds over what it should weigh. This roof is in a precarious position because we are not raising it straight up, but at an angle. It will either remain immobile or we are about to lift off. I brace myself. "Lift up slowly," Larry instructs over the radio. Suddenly, boom. The entire roof shoots approximately 2 feet into the air, swinging wildly toward the control panel, with Larry and I clinging on like pirates in a storm-tossed crow's nest. We collide with the control panel, bending it at a 45-degree angle and damaging most of its components. People begin pouring out of nearby trailers to witness the commotion. The crane operator is shouting over the radio, demanding to know what transpired. I can't help but smile. Larry is trembling. He glances at me, sees my smile, and realizes that I knew. We successfully set the roof down and are met by our superintendent. He is severely reprimanding Larry. When he approaches me and asks why I allowed it to occur, I simply state, "I just followed Larry's instructions." The superintendent is no fool. He has seen enough to understand exactly what transpired. Larry is demoted, and I am reinstated as the rigger immediately. A few shifts later, everything is smoothed over. Larry and I have since become good friends. We have faced numerous challenges together and support each other now. He is currently the foreman of our crew and allows me to operate as needed. Progressing through failures remains a legitimate path for advancement in my profession. I am genuinely happy for him. He has proven to be quite capable in his role. And I believe that is all I have to say on the matter. Story 3. My dad calculated my chores worth, charged me $600, then sold my car parts for $150 when I couldn't pay. Lesson learned. I trust this is suitable to share here. This narrative requires some background. Essentially, it is a tale of retribution that my father enacted upon me. Background: after I completed my high school education and had yet to determine my career path, my parents offered me the opportunity to live with them without paying rent, provided I adhered to a crucial stipulation: assist with household chores, refrain from bringing any girls or friends home after 9 p.m., and occasionally contribute to the weekly grocery expenses. The build-up approximately 3 months had passed, and I was mostly complying with the second and third stipulations. However, everything shifted when I started seeing my first, adult, female companion. We will refer to her as Roxy, as she was quite the daring individual. Roxy was an extremely negative influence. She encouraged me to stay out late and spend the majority of my earnings on alcohol and marijuana. I began sliding down a slippery slope from which I might not have emerged. My dad occasionally reminded me, "Hey son, you need to ensure you are helping with the chores, and could you pitch in $50 for groceries this week?" Those reminders ceased after 3 months of being out of school and about a month and a half of knowing Roxy. We returned home from a concert in another city, and for those who are of my, almost senior citizen, generation, it was a Papa Roach concert. She mentioned that she was too exhausted to go home and wanted to stay at my parents' house. The hour was 2:30 a.m. As we pulled into the driveway, I urged her to be quiet, but of course, being Roxy, she was anything but silent. As soon as we stepped into the house and I locked the door, she began belting out the chorus of Twisted Sisters "We're Not Gonna Take It" at the top of her lungs. Like clockwork, my parents' light turned on, and my dad emerged from his room like a cheetah. He spotted us and briefly glanced back into his room. Turning back, he said, "Take her home. Now." Without hesitation, I turned around and drove Roxy back. She was furious, insisting that I should confront my father, yada yada yada. After dropping her off, I knew I couldn't return home, so I opted to stay at her apartment. The following morning, a text appeared on my phone, "Return home at your earliest convenience. Love, Dad." I realized I was in deep trouble because A, my dad rarely texts me, and B, when he does, he tends to send lengthy messages rather than simple sentences. I bid Roxy farewell, likely thinking it was the last time I would see anyone, and made my way home. Upon my arrival, my dad sat at the table with a pen and a piece of paper in front of him. He instructed me to take a seat and presented the document before me. It was a detailed, itemized bill. He informed me that over the past month and a half, I had neglected to complete my chores, and he had calculated that my lack of contribution amounted to his lost wages, which were $25.00 an hour. He is a registered nurse. He multiplied 4 hours by 6 weekends by $25 per hour, concluding that I owed him $600 for wasted time. As an added measure, he included an additional $100 for the 2 occasions he had asked me for $50 to assist with groceries. He stood up and moved toward me, indicating a dotted line for my signature, asserting that I would repay this amount in 1 month's time. As I mentally calculated, I realized I barely made $1,000 after taxes in a month. He retorted that I should have considered this before I brought a girl home at 2:30 a.m. He informed me that if I did not sign the document, I had 30 minutes to gather my possessions and leave. I nearly broke down and requested to sign the paper but asked for a month's extension. He pondered for a moment, then agreed, stating, "You have 2 months to pay me $600. Oh, and by the way," he paused dramatically for 20 seconds, "if you fail to pay and continue to violate my 3 simple rules, there will be consequences." He amended the contract he had composed, and I signed it. A month and a half later, I managed to pay him $450. I had seen less of Roxy during the 2 months for obvious reasons, as my financial resources had diminished. She called me on day 45, expressing her desire to see me, lamenting why I was working so much overtime. I explained I needed to repay my dad or risk being kicked out. Naturally, she ended the call shortly after. The next day, she messaged me about a concert in another city, saying, "Oh, it's a band I really, really like. I have wanted to see them forever, plus I miss snuggling up with you at concerts." Foolishly, I agreed to join her. While at the event, my wallet was lifted from my front pocket. To this day, I suspect Roxy may have been involved, although I have never been able to confirm it. After returning home and dropping Roxy off, a few days passed. My dad knocked on my door, marking day 55. He inquired whether I wanted to pay him the remaining $150 or wait until the 2 months were up. I assured him I would handle it and headed to the bank immediately since I had just received my paycheck. I scanned my room for my wallet, but it was nowhere to be found. I searched the jeans I had worn to the concert with Roxy, yet my wallet was absent there as well. It's important to note that I had and still have a dreadful habit of leaving my wallet in my jeans after removing them and forgetting it for several days. Panic ensued as I could not locate my wallet anywhere. I checked the house, the backyard, my car, and even called my last workplace to see if it had been found. No one had seen my wallet. I eventually returned to my dad, who was in the backyard mowing the lawn, to inform him of my predicament. He offered me a half smile and responded, "I regret your situation, but I'm treating you like a tenant now. Please go to the bank, obtain my money, and when you return with the $150, we can discuss the next steps." I hurried to the bank, my heart nearly stopping when the teller informed me my account balance was $3.42. My heart sank. It's worth mentioning that it was a local bank where I had been a customer since I was about 13. I was 18 at the time, so the staff recognized me and provided my account details after a quick verification. I returned home to inform my dad of the outcome. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Ah, that's unfortunate. However, just so you know, I still need my $150. I explained that there was no way I could provide him that amount in 5 days or less. He suggested that he would drive me to work since I didn't have a driver's license at that moment. He transported me to work, where I ended up spending around 8 hours. The revenge while I was working. My dad unveiled his extensive collection of craftsman tools and proceeded to drain all the fluids from my car. He enlisted a friend to help completely remove my engine, transmission, and tires. With my dad being an ASE master mechanic, they accomplished all of this in the 8-hour shift I was working. At the conclusion of my shift, my dad was waiting for me in the parking lot, dressed in his work coveralls, which I found amusing. He had grease all over his arms. He drove me home, and I noticed my car was positioned in the garage on jack stands. I looked at my dad and asked, "What's wrong with my car?" He gestured toward the garage. "Oh, go ahead and see. I have my $150 today." I jumped out of the car as soon as it was in park and ran over to my vehicle. There was a note affixed to the front from my dad's mechanic friend, stating that the engine, transmission, and tires had all been sold to him for $150, and that he would be happy to return the items and assist with reinstalling them in my car, provided I worked for him on my days off for the next 4 weeks from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I collapsed in tears, and after my dad chuckled for a bit, he informed me that my first shift would begin the following day. It is also worth noting that my dad owned this vehicle, and it was titled, registered, and licensed in his name, so, technically, he had the right to do as he pleased with it. He had merely allowed me to operate the vehicle as if it were mine. For the next 4 weeks, I labored with my dad's mechanic friend on my days off. After 2 days of work, we transported some parts of my car back to the house, where he taught me how to reassemble them, and slowly but surely, I developed skills as a DIY garage mechanic. This story may not belong here, but my father certainly took revenge on me, as shortly after losing my car, Roxy ended our relationship, and ultimately, my dad spent 6 months of my life teaching me how to be a relatively responsible adult. To top it off, once we had successfully reassembled my car and had it running again, my dad approached me with an envelope containing $450 and a note that read, "Stop being a fool." Summary: I lived at home with my parents after finishing high school. I neglected to assist with chores, brought a girl over after the designated time, and failed to contribute to grocery expenses. My father provided me with a contract to repay an amount for the time he felt was wasted. When I violated the terms of the contract, he and a mechanic friend stripped my car almost to the frame, compelling me to work with the mechanic friend to earn back my vehicle's parts and help reinstall them. Ultimately, this experience taught me about car maintenance, and in the end, he returned the money to me. Edit for clarification. Edit to my edit, thank you immensely for the tokens, support, and kind words. My dad could be strict at times, but he has always been fair. Nothing he did was unjustified. I was living rent-free as an adult, and all he required was that I clean the bathrooms, vacuum the carpeted areas, avoid bringing girls or friends home at odd hours, and pitch in for groceries occasionally. As an adult, I honestly deserved far worse than what I experienced. The adult version of me now at 37 would have scolded my 18-year-old self and said, "Get out of my house, you ungrateful person." Edit to my edit of an edit incredible. This is astonishing. You are exceedingly generous. For those interested, I have shown this post to my dad, and being a man in his mid-60s who doesn't use social media frequently, he typically responds with comments like, "Oh, that's nice," or "Okay, cool." I deeply appreciate the kindness and thoughtful comments. Final edit: this incident occurred around 2001-2002. I have become so accustomed to texting that I completely forgot I received messages via a pager, not a phone. I'm not joking. My memory falsely inserted a T-Mobile Razr flip phone into my recollection. When someone inquired, I had to dig back and remembered it was a Motorola pager, the kind with a large screen that could accommodate an entire text message. Story 4. Ask Dentist B about my fang and pain. Dentist A canceled my root canal for seeking a second opinion. WTF. For the last several weeks, I have been seeing Dentist A regarding issues with my teeth. He recommended a root canal, a tooth extraction, and braces. I have contemplated these suggestions quite deeply. I have a tooth that sticks out, which I refer to as the fang, and it sticks out visibly whenever I smile. I thought it was cute and distinctive to me, and I did not wish to have it removed. I researched whether it was feasible to leave it as it is, and various sources indicated that it was possible, but it needed to be discussed with my dentist. So, I visited dentist the following day to inform him that I wanted braces but did not want to change my fang, and he bluntly stated that I could not do that. He heavily suggested that it was unfeasible, although he did not explicitly say so. He asked why I did not want to correct my fang, which struck me as an odd and rather personal inquiry, but I humorously responded that it was simply unique to me. In a patronizing manner, he replied, "It's not unique. Everyone has that. You are the only one who does not wish to fix their imperfect teeth." This made me feel belittled. Everyone I care about has complimented my fang and made me feel accepted, but this made me feel ashamed, although I knew it was merely his viewpoint. I also mentioned that one of my front lower teeth had been causing me mild discomfort for some time, even before I began flossing, and it was especially painful when I did. Dentist stated that he had already examined that tooth during the extraction and said it was fine. He suggested that I should use waxed floss or that it might be my sleeping position that caused the issue. I left, but the pain persisted, particularly following the extraction a few days earlier, so I returned the next day requesting an X-ray. He repeated that there was nothing wrong and that he had already checked it. I insisted, adding that the tooth also slightly shifted when I moved it with my tongue. He eventually approached, looked at my tooth, and simply stated, "It's crooked." This was new information for me, making me think, he could have informed me of this earlier if he had merely looked closely the first time. He again mentioned that if I ever wanted to correct this, I should have taken his advice to get braces, but I would rather keep my crooked fang. I inquired if getting braces would alleviate the pain, and he sidestepped my question while heavily suggesting that I should just get braces. So, I insisted on an X-ray because things were not adding up, and I was not receiving clear answers. He told his assistant to give her what she wants so she can see for herself that there's no issue. They finally provided me with the X-ray and said there was nothing causing the pain, leaving me perplexed. I had received more opinions than facts from Dentist A, and I urgently needed a second opinion since Dentist A seemed intent on planning an implant for my teeth because I would not agree to braces. I have nothing against implants, but I am uncertain if I want to proceed with that when I am still unsure about the issues with my braces. Thus, I went to another dentist, whom I will refer to as Dentist B, simply to ask for clarity regarding my situation. I posed all the questions I had asked Dentist A, and he explained that the pain in my lower front tooth might not be resolved simply by getting braces. He recommended a full X-ray scan from a different location, where it would be available to determine whether a wisdom tooth was causing my teeth to crowd at the front and lead to this discomfort. He also detailed the potential risks of not addressing my fang, which would merely lead to further misalignments, which I acknowledged. I was relieved to finally receive answers to solidify my thoughts. At this point, I no longer feel inclined to get braces, but I still wish to complete a full scan in case I needed one. I arranged for the scan, and the following day was my root canal appointment with Dentist A, which is where everything took a turn for the worse. Dentist arrived late to my appointment, forcing me to wait an extensive period, and I was already feeling mentally and emotionally drained as I dreaded speaking with him again while also battling a cold. When he finally returned, I was made to wait once more, which I did patiently. When my turn arrived, I informed him that I had obtained a full scan when he suggested he would rescan my teeth. Again, he adopted a condescending tone, questioning, Why did you do that? Are you trying to waste your money? Do you possess a lot of money?" This naturally felt overly personal. Everything he uttered seemed too personal and frankly none of his business in my view. He then queried why I did not bring the scan results with me, to which I responded, "I didn't think you would need it." He continued to rant about some matter, and honestly, I began to zone out because this entire interaction was testing my patience, and I did not want to show my growing agitation. I asked if I should retrieve my scan papers, and he said, "Yes, you should have." Thus, I made the long walk home, feeling extremely frustrated, exhausted, and generally upset. I mentally insulted him and called him names to make myself feel better, and upon my return, I again waited for my turn to consult. After 2 other patients, he finally approached me and requested the scan. I showed it to him, and he asked, "Why did you get a scan?" I thought about ignoring his question because I believed it was not his concern since it was merely a scan. Additionally, he had disregarded many of my queries, so I assumed he might overlook this one as well, but he asked again, "Why did you get a scan?" I will relay the entire exchange here, me, because dentist B recommended that I obtain one. A. Why? Me, because I wanted to inquire with him about braces. A. Then we're canceling your root canal. Me. Why? I merely wanted to gather more information that you did not provide. How does seeking additional answers and obtaining a full scan interfere with our root canal plans? A. Because you trust him more than me. You didn't want to get braces to correct your imperfections, and now you're consulting another dentist rather than me. I already told you that the discomfort in your lower front tooth could stem from your sleeping position or the floss you were using. Me. But I was just inquiring. Dentist B also indicated that the pain in my lower front tooth might be due to a wisdom tooth, and if that is the case, braces would not help. I fail to see how this impacts our plans. A. Because my plan for your teeth differs from his plan for yours. You cannot have a root canal. Me. But I was merely seeking answers. A. Well, you cannot have a root canal. Me. Okay. Then I departed. I simply do not comprehend this. I am exhausted from going back and forth, retrieving the full scan documentation for him only to be told to leave. That entire interaction felt as if he were suggesting I betrayed him by asking another dentist questions that he was unable to address professionally. Therefore, I wish to inquire, did I do something wrong? Am I the one at fault in this situation? Because genuinely, I am at a loss. In summary, a condescending dentist chose to cancel all of our arrangements because I sought information from another dentist and reacted as if I had betrayed his trust. Edit, I researched, and yes, I am entitled to request a second opinion from another dentist, and yes, I can visit multiple dentists simultaneously. This was not the first occasion I was informed of this by healthcare professionals, including my previous psychiatrists. Therefore, yes, it appears the only conceivable reason he would reject my request for information from another professional is due to his own insecurities. Regardless, matter resolved. Terrible dentist. I hope he faces consequences for allowing his personal biases to interfere with his professionalism.